Hi again, welcome everybody to another session of Navigating a Crisis, Conversations of Change. Today we're really lucky to have Morgan Cataldo from Berry Street here, but before we start to hear her perspective, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are both meeting from, or where you're potentially watching this from. Pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and the ongoing work that they do to continue to support this land. So I will hand it over to Morgan to introduce herself, because I'm sure she can do it better than I can. And then we'll get started.
Hello. So yes, my name is Morgan. I work at Berry Street. My title there is the Senior Manager for Youth Engagement. So I head up a really cool initiative called Why Change, which we call a social and systemic change platform for young people aged 18 to 25, but looking to make that 18 to 30 actually. With lived experiences of socioeconomic disadvantage, so deep systemic oppression from systems that have let them down.
Yeah.
And over the space of 2 years plus, learning how to use that lived experience in a strategic way. So beyond kind of the traditional storytelling about the sadness, which is obviously very important, how do we actually use that lived experience in public policy design, service design, to actually just create more meaningful services for people that are partnered with the people who are most affected. So yeah, I feel pretty privileged to have such an incredible role. We currently have 13 young people on the team, range from a whole different bunch of identities and lived experiences. And yeah, I think that's all I can say about that. So I work 4 days a week there, and then I work 1 day a week consulting, do my own stuff.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. I have so many questions.
Yay.
We're gonna go to these three and we'll see where else we end up. But it's such an important role, and I love the fact and really value the fact that you're working with youth. Not that there's any wrong with working with adults, obviously, but it's you know, how do you empower people from that outset before they come further entrenched, further oppressed, further marginalised?
That's right.
Really help them find and utilise the power and the knowledge that they have.
And a lot of that's based on, so I'm very happy to share, I came up through being a recipient of services myself when I was younger. And so there were sort of three things happening at once. And one was that I was a recipient of the service as a client. I was studying social science. And I was thinking about there's such a, and I had this lived experience whilst I was in all of these things. I was working in the sector. I was working in the sector at the time. In the not-for-profit space, I was studying social science, and I had lived experience, and I was in services all at once.
And so micro, meso, and macro.
Exactly. Yes. And so I had this kind of, you know, I just couldn't understand, and I didn't have the language for it at the time, why people who were affected weren't designing services. I couldn't put it together. I couldn't understand it. In a very naive way. I was just like, why is this not happening? And that's kind of helped.
Good question. Why is it still not happening?
Yeah. And then I've had some pretty incredible mentors along the way who kind of went, do you know about this thing called co-design? And, you know, then a door opened, and then another door opened. And 10 years later, I'm here at Berry Street, which is just such a privilege. And with Why Change, who I've kind of inherited in a way. And so I just think it's always really important to acknowledge the history of Why Change, which was, you know, Lauren Oliver, who was in my position before me. But it was co-designed and co-produced with young people from the inception of it. So Crystal, Moon, Damien, and I think there was someone else called Lily. And so I just find it really important to bring their spirit in whenever I'm talking about this, because the accumulation of them together is why I'm here. And we're sort of in this period now where we've had 4 years of a pilot with Why Change, and we're figuring out how to turn it into its own social enterprise embedded sort of initiative within the organisation, which is so exciting.
Amazing.
But those things never happen without who's walked behind you. So I think that's important to share.
Yeah, right, exactly. And the acknowledgement of that is super important. And the scope that Why Change has to, you know, broaden as well.
Yeah.
It becomes a part of a partner process and embedded within a range of different organisations and sectors. Berry Street's very lucky, and Berry Street, you know, obviously have supported that, but how do we get that out further?
Yes, it's reciprocal, isn't it? And there's more opportunity for sure. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
That's okay.
But I guess how we've been structuring up these sessions is to ask a series of questions, and if we, divert down another path as we go, then we do. But the first question that we've been asking is, what are you currently doing for yourself, your staff, the people you serve, your organisation more broadly, to manage the current situation and ensure that people maintain a sense of safety, dignity, and it's all done with a real human-centred approach. And I know that things have kind of shifted a little over the past few weeks. The mad scramble to kind of reorient after COVID came and shook us all a little has changed. So anything that you want to share and how you have got yourselves to the point where you are now, or what's been working for you, anything you want to share in that space would be great.
Yeah, so the first sort of, it feels like such a long time, doesn't it? Jesus.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's like a year and a week.
Yeah.
But like the first sort of 2 weeks was just really brutal. It was really, I think like I knew it was serious, but there was a part of me that was like, we'll be right. We'll be right. We'll just move it all online. We'll be okay. And then it just very quickly became, oh, this is not okay. This is going to be really, really hard for all of us. And obviously when you have like a lived experience of, complex trauma, I say all these things, because we know all the sort of deep kind of assumptions around that. But
yes,
there was so many different things being activated, both in myself, but also in the team of young people I'm working with as well. And I think the hardest thing for us was that what we all realized really quickly and together, which was quite beautiful, was the importance of us together, which we knew theoretically, I think, but to really feel that in kind of our bodies, and the loneliness and the kind of frustration of not having bodies in a space, which we've all reflected on quite a lot together, has been really tough for all of us, actually. And in one way, it's revealed how beautiful that is, because it means we're doing something right, that people miss that and want to be back there. And in another way, it's really hard because I'm so out of control and I have to create this safe container in this electronic way. And I don't care what anyone says, it's impossible to do it in the same way that you can in person for a whole bunch of different physiological, psychological reasons. Plus also having the barriers of technology, who has a laptop, who doesn't, who has internet, who doesn't, for some people seeing themselves on a screen is really overwhelming. So just working with all that complexity, I guess the thing that became really obvious to me really quickly was, okay, how do we co-create safety? This is not just about me pushing what my version of safety is. And so I know a lot of teams and people they're doing like weekly huddles and, all these sorts of things. And I think that that's great. For us, it was, I'm going to scaffold really quickly in terms of material, what we need. Here's setting up the space. And then it was like, okay, what's this going to look like? Let's just see what emerges, because that's how we work. That's always how Why Change has worked. And very quickly, these things started to happen. Like a young person would say, oh, I think I'm going to start up just a coronavirus support chat group where we just meme and joke and vent and check in. We set up a Centrelink page really quickly just to chat about all of the changes that were happening there to support people. All these things just started to organically happen from the space that was kind of set up. So I feel really proud of how we've all responded, not just how I've responded, but as the collective of how everybody has shaped that process together. And sometimes being, a leader in the space is doing that. You come in really quickly, you build, and then you stand back and you see what works and what needs to be taken away and what little pieces are being brought in. So you bring that into the scaffolding. So it's kind of been 6 weeks of that, and just letting every day kind of wash over me and seeing what's coming up and what I have to respond to and what we need to respond to, and trying to give this sense of agency inside of all of this. So there's still not that feeling of having things being done to us, which is happening. So I think the question is like, what am I doing to support myself in that space, or us in that space? I guess it's being as comfortable as I possibly can, which is still never very comfortable, with just letting things happen. And trying really hard not to control how it happens, but responding in the best ways I can in each moment. And like I was saying to you before, like, how do I respond instead of react, which is still really hard, and it's something I definitely haven't got right yet. But and just allowing space and time, like space and time to grieve, to have one-on-ones, to have group sessions where we're just like, hey, let's just like make sense of some shit together, because like no one else is letting us do that, because we're not allowed to do that. Everything's really like business as usual, and we have to just keep going. And what's the opportunity? And, you know, and all those things are important. It's not to take away from that, but underneath all of us at this point is a human experience that's emotive, and no one, I just feel like there's not a lot of spaces right now to tap into that. So creating as many possible spaces as I can to delve into that more phenomenological, emotional space of just, oh man, this is like a mess. This is just so many different feelings all at once.
Yeah.
But I need to be able to process them. So we're processing together a lot. Whilst also just doing the work. There's so much work that we have on. So, but creating that time to go, yep, that's secondary today, because right now the immediate thing is this. Yeah. This is what's come up today. So this is what we're responding to today.
Yeah.
So as much as that as I possibly can. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think there were so many things that you spoke about there, you know, the value of the collective, the value of coming together, the value of being able to be a group, and what you get from that, you know, the interpersonal kind of responses, the physiological responses that you get from being other humans, that, you know, in a way we become disembodied because of we're constantly looking at the team, looking at ourselves. It's all very unusual. So it's how do we remain really embodied through this, so we don't just completely go into our heads and wig out or shut down or disconnect even more. And this
also
idea
like the disembodiment that we already feel if you're a trauma survivor.
Yeah.
So it's this really bizarre experience of already managing periods of dissociation and disembodiment, whilst there's also other layers come on top to just kind of force that on everybody in a bigger way. So also what that's brought up, being forced without consent to be at home, to do all these things, which of course we're all doing because it's really, really important to be doing them. But you can't take away from the fact that it's bringing up a lot of stuff for so many different people who have already suffered through things that were out of their control. So, yeah.
So the space that you're creating for people to be able to acknowledge that, process that individually or collectively, and to have as much agency as possible in determining
that experience.
It's super important. And you know, this idea of being able to hold multiple emotions at once, because there is so much, I mean, from my own personal perspective, there's so much grief and despair, but there's also so much hope and possibility. How you create the space to hold the two, because it's not about either or. They're both valid, and they're both, you know, very valid responses to the current.
That's right.
It's like, how do you create space to hold them in a way that, you know, one is not acknowledged or not heard or
absolutely
not ignored. Yeah,
that's right.
Wow, that was great. That was it's just so awesome to hear how much you're doing to support the human through this, because I think it's true, you know, people have been very quick to just respond, and particularly in the helping kind of space, it's like you are trying to support clients, you're trying to support people that you support people through this, but you're also experiencing it yourself. So
that's exactly right.
Even more important to have space to be able to, you know, to debrief, to offload, to process what's happening.
And it feels kind of, my favorite thing bringing in kind of systems thinking around some of this stuff is that, and not that I'm an expert in any sense, but I study it and I love it and I do a lot with it, is that it feels counterintuitive to slow down when there's immediate need.
Yeah.
It feels so counterintuitive. But the scariest thing I see happen when there's crises like this is how quickly everybody responds without sitting long enough, I think, in the problem, like empathizing in that problem. And so a lot of my work is really kind of beautifully shifted into, like, I was reflecting on this on a call just before, like I'm sitting in these meetings and what I'm finding myself doing is, okay, I'd like everybody to slow down here because I think we've missed something really important. And these are not small conversations. These are conversations around designing new programs and like I guess my biggest fear is inside of all this, we're reacting, and in the reaction, we're still creating with the same power dynamics that existed in the old system,
Correct.
which is still the systems that we're dealing in now.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have a whole lot more to deal with when this is starting to, I hate saying like when this is over, because there's no such thing. It's changed everything fundamentally.
Correct.
But then we'll have a whole lot of extra stuff to deal with based on the decisions we made in reaction, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I'm trying to, it feels so counterintuitive even to me, not to just, like jump in and just like really quickly do things. But I'm reminding myself every day that pause and trying to just slow people down back into that process and be like, I promise you that if we spend that, we give it more time, we give it the time that it deserves in the complexity that it is, we'll be able to come up with some better responses here, because otherwise we're going to be dealing with a whole bunch of mess down the track. Absolutely.
And it's that idea of not snapping back into, or in the space of the unknown, go backwards and not just replicate what we've already done in the space.
100%.
It is to have that time to, in that pause, as you so beautifully put it, is to really consider and to really examine what the possibilities are. Yeah.
And it feels like it makes me think of, we talk a lot about, when you're someone that's come from a particular history and you're trying to like pull yourself out of a hole. It's so easy to just want to sit back in that hole because it feels familiar and good in some ways. And there's connections and relationships and life down there that you've created, but you get to a particular point where you realize that you're ready to maybe do something different. But there's such a deep, like I've had this in myself too, to just stay there or to just continue on, even though it may not be good for me because it feels familiar.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a similar thing, is that it's so easy to just rush into reactions and responses and solutions right now in the same way that we would have pre-COVID.
Yeah.
But those solutions weren't working either. So
exactly.
How good that we've kind of got this opportunity to pause and say, can we just kind of reflect on all the things that we weren't doing very well? Because this is an opportunity to try and do something a bit different. And I think a lot of that difference is actually in the mental models, the mindset, how we show
Paradigms.
up, what we're bringing, our identities, how that influences processes. That feels like the right direction for me right now.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. The next one, you talked about having some agency and having some choice through a process like this. And the next question is pretty much around that. It's not necessarily agency from yourself, but it's opportunity for agency for other people through this process. Is how can people support you? How can people support Why Change? What are the things that at this point in time, people want to feel that they're able to make a contribution or able to be involved in a positive way. What are things that people could possibly do to support your cause or your program, or the thinking that what you're talking about, the new ways of being now? What are ways that people support that?
Yeah, cool. I think one of the key things that can happen is if there's people in organizations who are wanting to work alongside young people with the lived experience of what Why Change has, that consider bringing them in as consultants at the moment. Like, we're talking about, who do we go to find solutions? And to me right now, the people we should be looking to are the people that know how to survive.
Yep.
And they're often the communities that don't get acknowledged, are kind of looked down upon for a whole bunch of different reasons. But to me, it's like, there's so many communities out there who have had deep systemic oppression for such a long time. They get what survival looks like. They get what thriving looks like. And so how do we actually tap into that? And it's not about them having to do anything differently. It's about us approaching it differently. So actually acknowledging and deeply valuing their wisdom. And to do that means to pay them. It means to capability build. So is there any offerings for training? And I think the key thing here is listening. So before we do anything, if there's people that we want to work for or do things for, to me, the very first thing people should be doing is sitting back and going, well, how do I develop a relationship with those people first? Not how do I come up with some business strategy? Like, how do I actually go to those people first and say, what is it that you need? Is there something that I could offer you that may be able to help? Because I think it's so easy to fall into that saviorism mentality of I have something and people are going to want it. And it's like, yeah, probably. But, you know, the thing that's really important in that is consent and a co-creative kind of mentality. So I think that would be the number one thing. How can people support why change? Kinds of, as I've said, like get in touch with us and see if there's a way that you can bring in that youth perspective into your projects, into your thinking, into your designing, into your conferences, into your online, you know, whatever's webinars. There's so much to offer from this community. Yeah. And then I guess just in terms of other things, the things we're always on the lookout for is, you know, as I said before, one of the most difficult things is connectivity right now. So just any solutions anyone has around computers and like, you know, is there any software that people think is really fantastic that cuts through some of the noise, like any of those things. But really the number one thing right now is relationships, building really strong alliances.
That came to mind while you were speaking, is this idea of being relational rather than transactional. And often it's purely transactional when we engage people in or ask people for input or for advice or consultation. It's transactional. It's what can you give me, as opposed to what can we create together? How seeking to understand the experience, to understand the human, as opposed to just what can get done.
And it's absolutely, and it's true that sometimes people just need stuff. Like people just need money and need laptops and need internet, and that's it. So that's cool. But the way to figure that out is through the relational, is through to say, I need to deeply understand the need here before I just roll my solution out as a blanket solution and find out later on that a lot of people needed something else or something different. So, absolutely.
And that idea of, you know, really learning from people who've had an experience as a service user or had that experience of being marginalised and oppressed and disadvantaged is, you know, trying to solve the system from the inside is often really difficult unless you get that external perspective. And when you've been in it for so long and understand it so well, and it's also familiar, it's really difficult to see that territory with new eyes. You can seek, because sometimes it's not so much, you know, what we need to bring in, it's what we need to let go of. Right. So, you know, the change doesn't have to be radical. There are things that can happen which will shift structures and shift systems and shift paradigms without, you know, just burning the world. So I think having those external kind of perspectives and opinions and experiences is really helpful in gaining a much richer understanding of what we can do.
Totally. And I think like speaking to that point you talked about with radical, I think it's Angela Davis who talks about the root of radical or revolutionary. I think it's radical, and she speaks about like radical means the root, you know, so I find it really interesting, like, and I, you know, don't take what I'm saying as like the ultimate truth. It's just things I think of based on what I've read. But this idea that radical needs to look a certain way, you know, like radical needs to be loud and this and that, and it absolutely does in some context, but to me radical is the root, and there's ways of attacking that root. There's so many different ways of attacking that root, and I think, you know, so many different communities have shown us how to do that, you know. Black communities, Indigenous communities, you know, just continually calling out what is actually happening, you know, around racism, around whiteness, around kind of oppressive capitalistic structures that only see the person through the economic as an economic asset rather than a human being. You know, these are the things that to me are at the root. And so to actually do work around that is around acknowledging and kind of deeply excavating from there first.
That's beautiful. I like that.
I'm pretty sure it's Angela Davis. I'd have to look that up because it just came into my mind, but I'm 100% sure it's her that has talked about it through her prison abolition work, you know.
Oh, well, that would make, That would make sense. There'll be a lot of people Googling Angela Davis.
I hope so. She's brilliant. She's so brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, excellent. Love it. Love it. Love it.
I think she says something like, to be revolutionary, you have to act like that all the time and believe it's possible. She's got this really amazing quote about it's a mindset. It's a mindset. And of course it's in the doing, but it's in the possibility. Yeah. But it's in the possibility of how you're thinking about something as well.
And I think that for that I guess links to something that I've kind of recognized with a lot of what's happening now is there's this rhetoric around, we're all in this together. But to me, like rhetoric, because what's the action? What's the what sits behind that? Is it just work? Is there a deeper meaning that we are having a collective experience, and if we are having a collective experience, and every experience of that is valid, not just my identity, or
absolutely
my position or my socioeconomic role. So yeah.
Totally. And so on that, that's such I don't know if you want me to, I can rant for ages. I think you know me. So I don't want to railroad. I'll say something quickly on that. So yeah, that whole, we're in it together, and so many people have written about this already. It's not new news, but yes, we are. And we're also just so not, we're having our own individual experience of something, but then particularly marginalized communities are having a whole different experience altogether. And so I think it just feels really yuck to say things like that. I get the spirit behind it, and I'm not against that, but usually the people that come up with catch cries like this are the ones that get to dominate the conversation. And so their experience becomes the dominant experience. And for everybody else, it's like, well, if I'm not having your experience, somehow my experience is wrong.
Correct.
Because it's not yours. And so it's like that whole thing we've seen about, first responders and the health service people being called heroes, instead of actually just giving them what they need. And paying them well. And
exactly.
And structurally, radically shifting a system to say, well, if you are the heroes, then how do we actually give you what you need so you are not dying of coronavirus in these extremely risky environments? But instead we throw parades and we clap on balconies and we do all these things. And it's not that I'm saying that the celebration isn't not important, it's important. But I think for a lot of people, they're thinking like, this is a huge slap in the face, like, because I'm out here risking my life for you, but you're voting for policies that are hurting me and my communities. So how does this, you can't reconcile that, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So it's expanding awareness as well as, and understanding, understanding the language, understanding the words that you're speaking.
Yes.
Impact, how they impact other people as well.
Yeah. Like think critically about how you think, why you think, and what those actions from that thinking are going to do to affect other people. Yeah.
Love it. Amazing. Thank you. And this should be an interesting response. The final question, which is always my favourite, I must admit, is what is your positive reframe? Assuming you have one, I'm sure you have one, but what is your positive reframe for how this crisis can create opportunities for improving the collective good? I mean, the individual good, yes, as well, but, the collective condition. Can you see ways that this might potentially be of some benefit?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I have a positive reframe, but I definitely have things I'm thinking that could be like beneficial. I think there's definitely things that could be beneficial if we do them right. And I feel like, I don't know, the thing that sticks out in my mind is that it's an opportunity to deeply reflect on all the things, like I was saying before, that we were doing wrong already. So it's just, I just see it as such a huge opportunity to slow down and be like, what's not working? Because we can so clearly finally see, like people who couldn't see it are now really starting to see what wasn't working. Whereas that seeing, that visibility was so clear for marginalised communities for such a long time, and jumping up and down screaming about this stuff for such a long time. So I feel like the opportunity here is for people who have a lot of socioeconomic and power with their class, race, ability to be able to stand back and say, are these systems, have they been created in ways that are destroying the fabric of who we actually want to be? And what are we doing to continue those systems? It just got really dark. Sorry.
I know. I have too.
Yeah, I know. It's really spooky.
Call at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, the world is saying enough talking. But like, yeah, like what can dominant systems and dominant thinkers be doing right now to actually go, all right, this is a mess. And then like, it's always been a mess. And now it's just kind of highlighted the mess. And so like, it sounds not negative, but I guess my positive spin there is that I just see a really huge and strong opportunity for us all to just critically reflect together in a way that doesn't so easily instigate like fragility around identity, you know, because right now it's just so important for us to be doing this so people can survive. And it always has been. But now that it's hitting people who haven't been hit before, now it's really important, right?
That's real.
Yeah, now it's real for a lot of people. So I see that, I see that. I really would like to be seeing more and more people doing less of here's what we're doing and just churning out, and more of like people saying, here's what we're thinking. We've gone into retreat. We're reflecting. And I know that that can be really impossible in this economic environment where we have to work to survive and things need to operate to survive. I get that. But amongst that, how do we, you know, I always see it as the big wheel that's just turning so fast. And how do we just try and just slow it down enough to try and see what it could look like moving the other way? And it's all very vague and abstract as I'm talking about that, because I'm not an expert to talk about how that happens. But that's what I see. Yeah, I see the opportunity for like deep critical inner interrogation around mental models at this point in time. Yeah.
That didn't sound vague and abstract at all.
Oh, good.
It's quite profound, in fact.
Oh, I don't know about that. I get worried when people say something I'm saying is profound. I'm like,
No, genuinely. It certainly has exposed a lot, and it's, you know, people have said it's a leveler, it's an equalizer, and I think your words are a bit more eloquent in that it's people who hadn't seen things before are not just seeing it but experiencing it now, and it's exposing so many of the flaws in our systems and in our relations and in our institutions that it's difficult to not see. But and I guess it is the opportunity to hit pause, and it's the opportunity to reflect. And in some respects, it's, you know, to resist the call to go back to
business as usual. I'm getting really panicked when I'm hearing people say, when we go back to normal. It's making me feel really sick. It's like, I don't want to. I don't think a lot of people want to. And the people that want to are the people that shouldn't want to. You know what I mean? Like, that in and of itself, that's why I can't say it. I just can't even say. So when everything lifts and goes back to normal, because what even was that? And things have so fundamentally been affected at this point that they're forever changed anyway, including us. So to want to go back to this illusion of normality, which I never understood what it was anyway, because I don't fit there very well. I think for a lot of people, that's a really scary concept. It's like, this is finally exposed enough that we can start a different conversation somewhere. Not just go back to the other conversation and be sitting there like, remember that time when we, when this crazy thing happened and then we did nothing, you know, like, we survived it as best we could. And then we moved back to the way things were. It just doesn't, so much of that doesn't make any sense to me at all.
No, it doesn't. And it's that, you know, people seeking safety and certainty, and that's always what you know, but you also can find safety and certainty in collective, in support, in solidarity, in alliance. So I think,
you've just hit on that beautifully, is that what was safe for a lot of people had always been unsafe for many.
Correct.
And so their desire to go back to their version of safety without considering what other people's version of safety is on the backs of their safety is not okay. Like, it's just not okay. It's like, oh, you're finally feeling even just an ounce of the level of unsafety me in this body and identity has been feeling for such a long time. And with that empathy, there is so much you could do with that now. Not to turn around to me and say, I can't wait to go back to normal, and in that normal continue oppressing you. You know, that's that to me is such a such a waste of just ignorant, and just ignorance to the point where it's just so harmful to so many different people.
Absolutely. So this new awareness will hopefully lead to different action, new action, positive action, to bring about better outcomes for everybody, to a small few.
And action that's coming from a place of finally being able to look at these communities that usually get the finger pointing treatment and say nothing has ever been wrong with them. It's the systems that we're in right now that, we say are broken, but are designed and are operating exactly as they're meant to, which just so happen to be extraordinarily harmful for so many different people. So to be able to sit there and say, I need to stop blaming the person who is experiencing homelessness or the person who is experiencing poverty, and say, well, what were the structural problems for that person to get there in the first place that I'm now even just getting a smidgen of an experiencing, because I've now been, my economic asset has now fallen away from nothing that's been in my control. And it's like, hello. That's what it's been like for all of these communities. They've done nothing wrong.
The problem is the problem, not the person.
So like, how do we start a conversation from that conversation? That's what I'm interested in. Not like, let's go back to normal. It just feels so
I can see you starting that conversation in many, many ways, Morgan.
I think a lot of people are. Thank you. I think a lot of people are already starting it, and it's just lovely to be part of that wave. That's how I see it. There's just a wave of people I'm already learning and speaking with that are all doing writing and thinking around this. And I think it'd be so wonderful to just keep building a coalition of that, so that it starts to make some noise in spaces where people wouldn't usually hear those voices.
It's been such a pleasure.
I can't believe that's been like nearly an hour already.
I know. And I'm sure there's heaps more that we could talk about.
Yes.
We'll do a part two. But it has been a real pleasure. It's been wonderful for you to share your perspectives on all of this and your experience and your vision, your hope for what can come out of this. It's been really beautiful.
Thank you so much.
What I am going to do is pop the some contact details of some description, whether it's through to Why Change or the Why Change website. So if people want to connect with you, then they
please
can. And hopefully learn more about the quite extraordinary work that you're doing, and really important work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cool.